Y2Panik, Melanie Newton, from the CCRU Writings. Quote, on receiving an interrupt, decrement the counter to 0, end quote, by William Gibson in Count Zero. Millennial mania reaches a certain peak in the Jerusalem syndrome, which exhibits eschatologism as one element in the programmatic fulfillment of prophecy. Whilst TV evangelists in the US are exhorting viewers to sell all possessions and flock to Jerusalem, and a papal blessing is promised to those visiting the Holy Land at the beginning of the new millennium, the Israeli Tourist Board, security forces, and the psychiatric profession are preparing for the arrival of up to 13 million Christian pilgrims. An abnormally high rate of psychotic disturbance is confidently anticipated, perhaps exceeded by episodes of mass suicide amongst disillusioned believers. At Megiddo, the biblical Armageddon, they are planning the ultimate sound and light show involving frog monsters, the greatest earthquake in history, and toxic hail from heaven. Revelation 16:16. Such incendiary visions dovetail neatly with existing regional tensions. In preparation for the millennium, various Jewish and Christian groups are plotting to demolish the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Dome of the Rock. This is seen as a necessary prelude to rebuilding the third and final Temple of Solomon, which would lay the mundane foundations for the New Jerusalem and induce the coming of the Messiah, completion of Okamenon. Meanwhile, Infotechnics is carried by Y2K into millennial spasms of its own, returning to 00 and digitally erasing the 20th century, reducing data to MMBO jumbo. Since cyberspace dates are incapable of counting above 99, they have surreptitiously installed the first intrinsically apocalyptic calendar in history, unconsciously produced within a planetary electronic registry. Starting from year 0 equals 00, Y2K condenses out the mechanomic unconscious and its non-arbitrary calcular functions, attesting to a raw decimal delirium indifferent to creed. Post-tribulationist eschatology slides smoothly into Y2K survivalism, orienting its volatile mixture of stockpiling, micro-militia activity, technophobia, and apocalyptic theology towards the self-fulfilling dynamics of millennial threat. Preemptive response produces reality. Panic is creation. The more you know about it, the worse it looks. It has always been integral to capitalist organization that science fiction functions as a factor of production, relating it intimately to panic phenomena. Y2K takes things to a new level, as a disaster that comes from the future, scheduled by accident, and thus precisely anticipated in time. If it proves effectively ineradicable, it is because it is trickling back from the self-confirming inevitability of its occurrence. Something is about to happen, and we know exactly when. The contours of the expected calamity are being continuously upscaled in conformity with an interlocking techno-panic syndrome, involving innumerable accidents, various network crashes, and elements of medical overstretch, financial chaos, transport, telecommunication, and power failures, food and water shortages, disruption of government services, hoarding, rioting, and terrorism. A number of governments have openly expressed their willingness to oversee millennium celebrations in conditions approximating to martial law. Army and police leave is being canceled, and emergency services prepared for exceptional conditions, including large-scale disruption of their own command, control, and communication systems, compounded by widespread equipment dysfunction. In the West, large government and corporate bureaucracies are triaging their Y2K vulnerability, writing off the most expendable sectors, accepting incalculable risk in others, and concentrating resources solely on the most critical areas, such as nuclear installations, strategic control, core information functions, and financial records. Forecasting the pattern of Y2K devastation is complicated by its artificial nature, which explodes in spirals. As a highly chaotic singularity, it is characterized by extreme sensitivity to micro-variables, the absence of precedent, and anticipatory looping through its own potentials. It occurs in advance of itself, punctually switches to an unknown climate, and spreads contagiously through networks. Modeling it adds complexity and noise, which feed it. Though entirely semiotic, it already amounts to the most expensive accident in history, whatever happens. $3.6 trillion and counting. Y2K produces a traumatic mutation in the information economy, involving an explosion of IT emergency services, analysis, debugging, integrated solutions, massively accelerated hardware replacement, global restructuring, and a crisis of confidence in computer-supported services, with the potential to run away into general market collapse. It interrupts a smooth upward curve of doubling microprocessor density, falling prices, and increasing market penetration with a singular cyberspace shock that is discontinuous or non-metabolic in nature. Junk shops stack up with prematurely discarded infotechnic hardware, providing the material base for a computer-age skip-scavenging cargo culture. Electronics must be subsocially recycled to release its frozen machinic potential. Cyberpunk begins with Y2K. Outside the public sphere, Y2K excitement is not only higher, it has changed phase entirely. As hysterical hyperlooping twists the millennium into a panic storm, it builds explosively on itself, producing an artificial density. Technonomic power splinters across schizophrenically juxtaposed time systems, spawning monsters. The first true counterculture. Lurking predominantly in the data combs of the crypt, numerous shadowy groups now proclaim themselves Y2K positive. These Y2Panik cults have begun building a mesh of massively decentralized subcultural impulses, directly investing ethnotronic time catastrophe, and aggressively promoting chronodissidence throughout and beyond the web. They celebrate Y2K as a threat to the order of time, a cultural event that is not textual, ideological, representational, intentional, or phenomenological, but rather machinic and numerical, subtractive, n-1. Y2K designates a crisis of calendric culture, a time bomb so perfected that the timer is the bomb. It simultaneously adopts a zero function of 24-hour digital time code, induces convergence with a calendric zero of count inception, dismantles clock calendar segmentarity into flat scales of duration, and triggers Teotihuacan. Even when it operates preemptively in any number of ways, it refers itself to the punctual Great Midnight that cuts hyperhistorical time continuum at 0000, doubling the retro-virtual chronogenesis of the century. Y2K is as old as computers. All that changes is the panic intensity. According to the Y2Panik cultists, or K-Goths, the total chronopolitical immune response to Y2K constitutes a program for Gregorian restoration, with the bug hunt masking a neo-Roman socio-political agenda. Far from being a mere technical glitch, the Millennium Time Crisis indexes the first neutral calendar in history, which escapes the numerocultural legacy of the Romans by beginning with the year 0 equals 00. The demand for millennium compliance attempts to reinforce the abandonment of an existing calendar, that of cybernetic or K-time, and suppress its associated time anomalies, sealing the calendar against 0. In the now notorious words of crypt denizen Count S0, quote, "So M-bug resistors think Matrix needs a new calendar. Totally steampunk. Wake up. IT's already K-time. Count 0 equals Greg date 1900. End quote.